Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also become a bitter pill, a spoonful of sugar, or the newly introduced tier of the medicine going down. Get some fabulous swag and make your life better. We got some bitchin' t-shirts, and they're awful rad and all those other hyperboles. Today, I'm excited. We have a friend of the show visiting with us today, Cindy Sheehan. You may know her from her activist work for a better part of nearly, I think, 15, 16 years now. Her son passed away or died in the Iraq War. And she's led the march on the Pentagon for several years now. The last one was in March. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to jump into some things today. Cindy, how you doing?
Okay. Our march on the Pentagon, the last one we had was last October.
Oh, okay.
And now because of, I think, COVID-19, I don't think we're going to ever have another one.
Yeah.
So, and it's just really sad that most people don't even care about wars or foreign policy or anything.
No, the Democrats don't.
I don't think Republicans do, but they usually support it.
Right.
And of course, Democrats support it too.
100%.
I just before we get into it, I was just telling a friend, I saw a post on Facebook yesterday where this guy's like, the Bernie Sanders delegates are going to the convention and they're going to say that they're going to do whatever if the platform doesn't contain single payer health care. And of course they have no power. Right, Bernie Sanders has given all his power away to the Democrat Party, right? He's already endorsed Biden, working for Biden. But I put on this, I said, well, I support single payer. I support some kind of form of national health care. But why doesn't anybody demand that the wars end? You know, why don't they demand that the Democrats put an end to this ridiculous, outrageous foreign policy that the U.S. has? It's sucking tens of billions of dollars, in fact, probably over $1 trillion, and, you know, harming people. Why isn't that a demand? And that's just my thing. You know, we have been around the world for decades, bombing, destroying countries, been an imperial power since the U.S. was founded. And there's no demand to end that, which I think, honestly, Abe, I think if U.S. foreign policy was corrected, if we stopped spending over $1 trillion a year on imperialism, we could solve our problems. We could solve the problems of this country.
Oh, no kidding. If not the world, it doesn't cost a lot of money to feed and give people water. Right. And the Democrats in the debates, except for Tulsi Gabbard, not a single one of those people talked about ending the wars, not even Bernie, which was his big thing in 2016. But he didn't say boo about war this time. Mm-hmm.
You know, he had a big thing to take the 10% of the Pentagon's money away. But from what I understand, the recent Corona whatever gave $30 billion more to the Pentagon. Right. So, you know, and I'd like to see how Sanders voted on that. But yeah, and I think, I'm not saying that, you know, I think we should stop funding the Pentagon to make America great again or anything like that. I just know that in a U.S. that is not, you know, killing people or supporting states like Saudi Arabia or Israel and killing people would make the world a better place also.
Well, I mean, but you don't need, people look at me like I'm some kind of a hippie when I say, well, shit, if you chop the Pentagon budget and the defense budget by 2/3, we would still be outspending China by 3 times.
Absolutely.
They just upped their spend about a year and a half ago from $150 billion to $225 billion a year.
Yeah,
they got one base outside of China. It's like we outspend the Russians by 5 times if we cut our budget by 2/3. I mean, there's so many things that we could put that money toward, and you know, it's like it's the capitalist, you know, clusterfuck gangbang that is just, you know, what runs the Defense Department, really.
Right.
But, you know, you mentioned Israel a second ago, and that's what I kind of wanted to talk to you about. I mean, Israel's bombing Iran, and this might sound like news to some people, but they've had a history of of fucking about with Muslim countries, don't they?
Yeah, you could say that, I guess, since like the late 40s, I would think, or even before. But I was thinking a lot about this interview because for the last 6 months, it's been COVID, right? And so even I have kind of slid off the radar of foreign policy, but supporting Palestinians has long been one of my issues. And all those mega Zionists I talk to, they tell me, Cindy, U.S. foreign policy actually hurts Israel. It makes us more vulnerable in the Middle East. And of course, it's not U.S. foreign policy that's doing that. U.S. foreign policy, especially since 9/11, has actually divided so many countries, destroyed so many countries, right? That Israel, what I call the illegal Zionist apartheid state of Israel, is actually stronger in the area. And I was in Jordan one time speaking to one of their ministers, and he said that they call it the Lebanonization of the Middle East, where we might not have supported Saddam Hussein in Iraq, or Bashar al-Assad in Syria, or those other countries, but the program has. But they were also very secular countries that they had Shia, they had Sunni, they had Christian, they had Jew, that all worked together because it wasn't like they weren't like a Muslim country or a Jewish country. They were just a country of all mixed religions. But the bombing of Iraq and since George H.W. Bush, right?
Right.
Has and when was he president? Like, I can't even remember, back in the 80s, right? Since then, Iraq has been weakened and has been broken up. So what happens with imperialism, whether it's U.S. or Israeli, is that the main goal is to cause division and get people to fight against each other. Mm-hmm. So they're not fighting these imperial powers, right? So the U.S. and Israel supporting Yemen, Saudi Arabia and bombing Yemen. Mm-hmm. Then Syria has held together, but there's been like all kinds of destruction. And I think really Iran is like the crown and the jewel of Israeli. They want Iran gone. Iran, right. And it's been a long time goal of Israel to completely destroy Iran.
Well, and then okay, but yeah, when I mentioned that they've been at it for a while, and obviously, I don't want to go all the way back to 48 and everything. I'm just talking about after, they've established a military. They didn't really do too much outside of, Israel and the territories, right? It was always messing with the Palestinians, but they weren't bombing other countries. That really kind of started after. There were some incidents in the 70s, but they really started going after other countries in the late 70s, early 80s. They're pissed at Iran because of Hezbollah and Hamas, right?
Right.
And if it wasn't for Hezbollah, Lebanon would have been, a territory by now, right? And so they want to get rid of Iran for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. But why this last 4 or 5 years? Because they've been bombing even before the JCPOA deal, right? And then the deal happened. They backed off for 10 minutes, and then when Trump pulled out of the deal in 2018. Now they're, bombing nuke sites. They're bombing, plants. They're bombing food supplies. And are they just trying to antagonize Iran into a war, hoping the U.S. comes in and helps them out?
Medical clinics, I've seen.
Right.
Well, and we know that, like you said, they've really gone after them recently. I think because of this softening of the other countries by the U.S. in the Middle East has given Israel more strength. And so I think it was 2009 that, remember when Israel was assassinating nuclear scientists
Yes.
in Iran? I just look at this and the audacity and hubris of these two countries, Israel and the United States, just like constantly amazes me.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how dare you? I'm not for nuclear power or for nuclear bombs, obviously, but we know that Israel has hundreds.
And they've never, and a real quick side note, they've never submitted to an IAEA inspection ever.
Never, ever. And we wouldn't even really know for sure if it wasn't for Mordecai Vanunu, right? Who exposed that program. And the United States has thousands. We don't even know. I don't even know, probably 10,000 nuclear bombs. And for U.S. and Israel to tell Iran, you can't have, and Iran has always denied enriching uranium to make a bomb, right? And IAEA was inspecting before Trump pulled out of the treaty,
and they said they were great, right?
Yeah, and they were fine. They were following the terms of the treaty, and so. I don't know, I don't have any idea why Israel is stepping up its covert bombing of Iran, because they're not flying airplanes over and dropping bombs. They're covertly planting bombs in these facilities. And so they haven't admitted it, but the New York Times even says that Israel is sabotaging Iran. And so because they're not going to admit it. They're not going to say we're the ones that did it. And so if Iran retaliates, then maybe that gives them an opportunity to strike back even harder, like they do, right?
Right. Well, I mean, but then that's my thing. It's Iran is not Iraq, right? They're a country of 80 million people, not 6 million.
Right.
And I don't know what they have nuke-wise. I don't think they have anything nuke-wise, but I'm sure they, because they've been buying a shit ton of stuff from the Russians for a lot of years. So they got real weapons. They don't have 4 ships in their Navy like Iraq did, where you take them out in 15 minutes. They've got a real Navy. They've got a real Air Force.
Right.
By default, they own the Strait of Hormuz. So what is Israel, thinking beyond just flexing its muscle and, claiming the same bullshit they always claim? We got a right to defend ourselves, which is, that's the most nothing statement ever.
Yeah, they're super paranoid. Well, they think right now that Iran is vulnerable, more vulnerable than they've ever been, because of the U.S. sanctions that have crippled their economy, because of COVID-19, which for some reason has hit Iran harder than other countries, and I guess there's political protests against the regime. So they think right now, and because Trump pulled out of the treaty, and another thing is, I think that they're feeling very supported by the U.S. in this, because the U.S. is also taunting Iran, correct? And so they're feeling in a stronger position, I think, to go after Iran than they have in a long time.
Well, and also too, let's just be honest. I mean, Netanyahu's having all kinds of problems. They postponed his trial because of the COVID virus.
Right.
But he's not terribly popular. He still can't get a coalition government together.
Right.
You think this is a way to? And there's no more. I mean, I won't say there's no more. I know there's people in Israel that are still kind of left leaning and kind of have a human side to him, but it's more right wing than I think it's ever been. Right. You think he's just trying to save his ass and get votes? Is this a cheap ploy for that?
Well, it could be that. I think there would be a lot of, like you said, a lot of support in Israel for any weakening of the Islamic Republic. in Iran. I know that they're very boldly also taking more territory from the Palestinians right now, which is a very popular measure with Israel. I almost want to call them psychos. They're like a psychotic state, and I know the people who run the United States are psychotic psychos too. But I do really feel like with their good friend of Trump, that they don't really feel any restraints to go after Iran.
Right.
You know, I know that the U.S. governments are always really good friends of Israel, but I think Trump has demonstrated an even more support for them.
Oh, well, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Jerusalem alone is,
Yeah, that was an incredibly horrific, undiplomatic move for sure, and it really demonstrated to the Palestinians and to the neighbors of Israel that that partnership was going to be even more destructive than it has been.
Right. Well, let me ask him. So, with China, they've just teamed up with Iran to create a new economic partnership thingamabobber, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese going to buy. Yeah, that's my foreign policy speak. I'm at the UN. I'll tell you, that damn thingamabobber, that won't stand. We won't stand for that thingamabobber. But they're going to buy more oil from Iran, make up for the sanctions that we've been pulling on Iran. Mm-hmm. The more China gets involved with Iran, and I don't necessarily believe, I don't believe in imperialism. I don't believe in hegemony, but it's strategic for China to do these things. I mean,
absolutely.
They're helping poorer countries. They're building roads in the third world. They're not bombing the third world.
Right.
They're not making their leadership take these draconian loans, these payday loans for equipment, and then screwing them, and then sending in the jackals, to reference John Perkins, and to kill these guys if they don't pay the loan on time, like the mafia. Mm-hmm. The Chinese are kind of make the old school. You make peace with your enemies, you make deals with your friends, and we all get along, and we buy stuff, and you sell the stuff, and then you have money, and your people don't go hungry, and then they don't bomb our shit, and we all live happily ever after. And it seems like they're extending that on a larger scale to Iran. What do you think will happen if, say, for example, the Chinese have ships in the Strait of Hormuz? What happens when the U.S. or Israel bombs those ships? The Chinese are a nuclear power.
Right. Yeah, it's really frightening to contemplate. And we know the U.S. and Israel have very little restraint, so it is really scary to contemplate. But I really think that this whole Corona thing has exposed the weaknesses of U.S. capitalism and imperialism. 100%. And so instead of the only thing the U.S. manufactures really is weapons and type 2 diabetes, I think. And
not the cure, just the actual type 2 diabetes.
And and cancer, and then they put those people into the cancer and diabetes industrial complex. But so China, I think, and especially looking back over the years, not even just since Trump, not even just recently, but since Obama, have been really doing this, is using yuan diplomacy. We call it dollar diplomacy. They've been making friends in Latin America. They've been making friends in Africa. Mm-hmm. I know they also exploit resources in these places. They have over 1 billion people. Unfortunately, the world still needs oil. What really gave me a lot of hope over these past months, that there hasn't been much hope, is when Iran took supplies and oil to Venezuela.
Right.
And, the U.S. was all like, oh, they better not, whatever, and they'll be sorry. But they got through, and they delivered it with no problem.
Right.
So, that gave me a lot of hope. And you said Iran is not Iraq. Iran, the problem with this is with Israel provoking Iran, for them to strike back or whatever. Iran, it only makes the resolve stronger to oppose the U.S. and Israel. These sanctions just make them stronger. Sanctions, we've seen economic sanctions. What they're supposed to do is make the people mad at their governments, so the people rise up against the governments, right?
Right.
But that's never worked.
It's like trickle down economics. It's never worked in the history of ever.
Worked. And so look at Cuba. It has been under sanctions and a blockade for what?
60 years.
Yeah.
61 years.
And, they're still surviving under these conditions. So, yeah, Iran's not going to roll over. China's not going to roll over. Russia's not going to roll over. The thing that I think has supported Assad in Syria has been the collaboration with Russia. Syria is the only place in that Russia has a foreign base. Mm-hmm. They have an Air Force base there. So yeah. I mean, it's a good thing to talk about U.S. foreign policy, and I'm glad you invited me on today to talk about it, because it's, like I said, the past several months has been just consumed with other things.
Well, and then also pseudo events too. I mean, I could give a crap if Joe Biden is drooling into a rubber diaper by September. I mean, seriously, it's like the tariffs against China have failed,
right?
And China, they're their own grease fire. I mean, they got a gazillion coal plants going up to help this roads and Beltway initiative thing that they're doing, and that's turning to an ecological disaster. But they still have brought 600 million people into the middle class in the last 10 years, the fastest on record for any country.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the mainstream press doesn't want to talk about that. And so, like I said, I'm not going to sit there and sing the praises of China. However, they're more strategic and they're doing smarter things than we are. We keep doing this toddler crap, and Israel's kind of following our lead, it seems. Mm-hmm. Right? We're the big guy in the room. You're going to listen to us. Like Mike Pompeo is he is the zenith of what's been wrong with American foreign policy for 140 years. That guy is a prick. And I swear to God, I don't think he's ever been in a fist fight with anybody that wasn't held down by his buddies to beat up on him at a frat house, because that guy is a coward. He's a chicken hot coward. And the way he talks, and the condescension, just that whole typical American exceptionalist condescension, the little brown people, and that's the problem we have as our foreign policy. That's the problem we've had for a long time. We haven't been half decent since the Marshall Plans.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, ask our indigenous population and the people who were forced over here to be slaves, how decent this country was founded on two very indecent things: slavery and genocide. So, and most colonial projects are, that's just like.
Well, the Spaniards did the same thing. Spain had their until about 130 years ago. They had a massive empire, and they lost it, and they're still a little pissy pants about that. You talk to some Spaniards today, and they want to be in the Belgium England discussion. You're kind of going, yeah, well, you guys lost it sooner than they did, so neener.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, though, I mean, what's the next step moving forward? Because what I see happening. I had a guy on a couple months back discuss it in these terms. He called it hate porn, right? Where these people just go to their silo, they scream at the TV for the thing that they don't like. So if they don't like, Biden, they scream at Fox News. And if they don't like Trump, they scream at MSLSD. And you know what I mean?
I call it MSNBCIA.
Oh, okay, yeah. I call it MSDNC and MSLSD, depending on the mood I'm in. So yeah, we all have a name for it. I mean, the word Microsoft is in the fucking title, right? It's like, right?
Yeah. I like CIANN also.
Yeah.
Or the Corona News Network.
The Corona News Network. There you go.
Starting to call them.
But that's the thing. Is like, at what point do people start really looking paying attention, because I've talked to so many people that are supposed to be progressive, that are supposed to be on top of what's going on. And when you bring up foreign policy, they'll say with a straight face, oh, that has nothing to do with domestic policy. I'm going, well, all the money that we say we don't have for the stuff that we need, it goes to defense. So what do you mean? We're in 149 countries right now. We support 73% of the world's dictators until we don't.
Right.
So when do people like just start to, because I imagine you got a way bigger friend base than I do. I mean, I got friends here that live in town that are, really nice people, but they're like, blue. And it's like I'm doing card tricks in front of a dog when I ask them anything about what you and I are talking about. And then online, forget it. Everyone's just an idiot online.
Yeah. I'm beginning to see that. Well, but I was just thinking of something to say, and it just kind of went away from me. Was there a question in that? Yeah,
there was a question. Well, I started with a question, then I ranted.
Maybe he should have re-asked me the question.
Yeah, I should have asked you the question last. And I'm on my third whiskey soda, so there you go. That's probably part of it. But that's the thing is at what point does the American voter, the American citizen, the taxpayer, start to demand a deal from their government, because the capitalists have a deal with our government, right?
Uh-huh. Well, and what got me is when you said that a lot of people, liberals or Democrats or whatever, they say that foreign policy has nothing to do with domestic policy. Have they seen the cops lately in the streets? That they like look like jackbooted thug RoboCops, Gestapo, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Did that just come out of nowhere?
Nope.
Did our Andy of Mayberry cop that didn't even carry a gun transform into a RoboCop without the development of the military, without all of this expenditure on imperialism? And a lot of police forces in our country, in the United States, they get discount or free military surplus, right?
Yep.
And they look like they're dressed to invade a country.
Fallujah. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I just wish Casey had some of that equipment when he was in Iraq,
Right.
But then they, so where does all that come from? Out of nowhere, now they're talking about, if you don't want to take a vaccine, I don't want to get into vaccines or COVID.
No, that's cool. No,
but if you don't want to take this vaccine, Trump's saying he'll make the military deliver it. That violates posse comitatus, I would think, right?
Well, actually, here's okay. But see, this is one of my big pet peeves. We got a few minutes here, but this is one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say, well, that was in the past. We don't need to worry about that now. Well, Obama in 2011 gutted posse comitatus. Yep. So what you just said is now kosher, and Trump can do it because now it's his personal fucking security force.
But right. So I think a lot of this opposition is coming from Trump derangement syndrome, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hello, he hasn't even approached the scale of Obama's corruption and violence, in his first term, right? I don't like Trump. I can't stand any U.S. president, but Obama for 8 years ran roughshod over the world.
He sure did.
And so people are saying, "Oh, Trump's a racist." I'm like, the first Black president in our history destroyed an African country. You moron!
Right.
And so,
but he regretted it though. He regretted it.
I don't think he regrets it.
He said it was a mistake. A mistake.
Oops, no. A mistake is dropping your phone in the toilet, like I did a few months ago. Destroying a country and turning it into the top slave, human. What's that called? Human trafficking place in the world. It's not a mistake. It's a plan that he presided over.
That's right.
So anyway, this is the issue, is that I think a lot of people here in the U.S., especially people who pay attention,
right.
I'm saying most of the people are just struggling to pay their bills and to keep a roof over their head, right? But people who pay attention, they divide along Democrat and Republican lines when there's not a line. It's like if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're jumping in the same pool.
Yeah. Well, there's no, this is the thing, except for gays, guns, and abortion, there's no difference with these parties. And they take money from the same guys except the NRA. Right. And there's a couple of guys like Joe Manchin who take money from the NRA, right?
Right. So that's right. That's basically right.
Right.
And those are to me peripheral issues.
Right, they are, but that's my point. Yeah. That's the only difference between these parties is the identity politics mongering that they do, while they have us in these foreign wars, while they spend our money overseas, while they give money to their corporate buddies.
Right.
So that's kind of with these pseudo blue people, and this is again the hypocrisy of it. It's like you're not a liberal or a conservative. You're a Republican and a Democrat, and you're definitely not an American. Right, because the old school conservative, like I got my issues with Kevin Massey or Ken Massey, whatever his name is, that the lone congressperson who stood up against the CARES Act and got drowned out by 534 other people. He was the only guy that said we have to have a vote, not a voice vote, and he got completely drowned out. Right, those guys are like built his own house with his own hands. He's one of those guys, but he's also kind of an asshole on other things. No one's perfect, but those guys, those don't exist. And the progressives, there's no progressive caucus in Congress. That's a joke. It's a bunch of corporate assholes who they're cool with trans people. Yay, I like trans people, but I also want to get out of the wars.
Right. That's exactly. Oh, you know what? I thought of a reason Israel might be bombing, sabotaging Iran right now. Maybe they're looking at the U.S. thinking, "Oops, we're not going to be able to count on them anymore."
No, we are a failed state.
Maybe we better go and just like destroy our, existential threats, because we really the United States is one of Israel's only friends.
I think they are Israel's only friend.
Maybe the UK. But Israel has just lost a lot of juice, and people aren't believing that they are the world's number one victims anymore, right? When they are destroying another people's.
Now, I was back there for the first Intifada, and that was the first time in my life. I'm half Palestinian. My dad's Palestinian. My mother's Brazilian.
I didn't know that. I thought you had some.
Yeah, and then and I don't have an emotional dog in the fight. Like for me, if I talk about the Palestinians, it's like talking about Nicaragua. So I got 2 steps removed emotionally. But I was back there in '88 during the first Intifada, and what my surprise when I got home was how many Americans were kind of turning around, right? Because you had all those Time Life photos of kids throwing rocks at soldiers, right? It looked like Kent State, right?
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I didn't hear derogatory shit. I didn't hear sand nigger or camel jockey. I heard, it's like, oh my God, wow, I'm really sorry. Wow, that's what's going on over there. Gee, I didn't know you were. And I'm like, yeah, that's my dad. I'm first generation, me and my brothers and cousins and stuff. Anyway, but that's the thing is that they've been losing juice for about 30 years. The PR disaster that has been the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And Europe's been awake for a long time. Europe's known this for a long time. They're not stupid. The Nordic countries have known this for a long time. Right. But so listen, in wrapping up, because I know you got some stuff to get going, but you're still hosting Cindy Sheehan Soapbox, right?
Yep.
Okay, because I'm going to put that in the link of the show and everything, and and just kind of go from there. But I'm
hoping to post this on Cindy Sheehan Soapbox and pass it around our interview here.
Excellent.
I'm starting another campaign besides Cindy Sheehan Soapbox, and that's called Justice for COVID-19 Elderside. And I can send you the link to our website. But what we are opposing is that at least 8 governors of the United States ordered skilled nursing facilities to take recovering corona patients. And that has, it was like in June when the New York Times said that has killed 50,000 elders.
Wow.
Those policies. And so, in the state of New York, it's something like 14,000. Here in California,
Wow.
it's 48% of the people who have passed. Gavin Newsom ordered skilled nursing facilities to take, and they're not equipped to deal with sick people. They're equipped to wash people, feed them. They're not medical facilities.
Right.
So anyway, so we're trying to expose that and try to get justice. And it's just like, I tell people, okay, they are so easily murdering these elders when we're told we have to shelter in place to protect the vulnerable.
Right.
They're murdering them. Sure. And another one of my questions is, how much are they saving in healthcare, benefits, Social Security? And, states usually pay for elders to be in care homes if they, first they like decimate their estates, and then the state will pay. So how much money are they saving by killing these people? If it's so easy to kill elders right now, what about when my grandchildren, are they going to make people like take a suicide pill when they turn 65 or something?
Well, listen,
you
don't know, but you said something a few minutes back that I've been saying for years. If you want to know American domestic policy, look at the foreign policy, and it happens here 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we do it 10 years later. It's not a surprise. Like when the protests were happening in the 60s, well, we were pulling that shit in Central and South America and in Korea in the 50s. So surprise, surprise, you start using riot police for protesters. It's just, it's to your point. And then this money that we keep feeding Israel every year, they don't need it. They get reparations from Mercedes and Hugo Boss and BMW. They've got 60% of the world's drone sales. And where do they test them? Gaza. Good times, right? And I'm doing an interview with Miko Peled tomorrow. We're going to talk about the U.S. police department's training in Gaza for years and years.
And that's one thing I was going to say is police departments are trained a lot by IDF.
That's right. Well, that move that Derek Chauvin pulled on George Floyd, that's an Israeli move, man.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I just also want to say is like, nothing's going to change until we like have principles that don't budge no matter who's president or no matter what political party's in power.
That's right.
Nothing will change because like you said, Trump is just building on Obama, and Obama is building on the 43 presidents before him.
That's right.
And, and it's really up to the American people to stand up, and not just stand up against statues or police brutality, because like you said, and like I said, that's just the chickens coming home to roost, people.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, and that's the thing is, I wrote an article for Texas Free Press a few weeks back, called "Facelifts Don't Make a Revolt," and basically, I'm just saying, look, you want to get the Confederate shit down. I get it. Columbus was a prick. I get it.
Yeah.
But after that, start protesting like the French do, 1 point at a time. UBI, Medicare for all, get out of the wars, free college. College was free when I went.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've seen during the this COVID thing, everyone's lied to you. Guess what? You can work from home. Guess what? We do have money. $1 trillion a day to the banks. It's $1 trillion to forgive all student debt, right? That's 1 day of bank bailouts. So we have the money. Medicare for all? Yeah, we have the money. We have it. So
they just do a little bit of a little creative number pushing on their computers. There's the money.
And our taxes do not reflect the bailouts. Our taxes don't reflect the bailouts. Our taxes don't reflect the wars for the last 20 years. They have it in another credit card thing at the Federal Reserve. I watched Ben Bernanke on 60 Minutes about 8-9 years ago, and he literally held his hand in the air when, I forgot the lady, one of the blonde people, I forgot her name, but anyway, she asked him, I forgot her name, but she said, so where does this money come from? And he holds his hand in the air and taps this imaginary keyboard. He goes, well, we have this separate account and we just put more zeros in it. And he holds his hand in the air and taps it like just more zeros. That's it. And I'm kind of going, and there's this libertarian cat that I've interviewed a couple of times. He ran for Senate a couple of years back in Texas. And one of the points he made was our taxes do not reflect the money we spent on the bailouts, the money we spent bailing out Israel, the money we spend in Saudi Arabia, the money we spend in all of the dictatorships that we spend money in, that's all in that secret magic account. So when people go, well, I don't want my tax dollars. Oh, they're not there yet.
Right.
But they're gonna, right? It's kind of sad, man. Well, hey, listen, Cindy, let me start wrapping up here. I'm really glad you came on. This was really a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun talking to you.
Thank you, Abe. Yeah.
You're super smarty pants.
And give my regards to Miko Paulette.
I will. I'm going to talk to him
tomorrow. I've had him on my show a couple times too.
He's been on a few times. He's a smarty guy, man.
He really is.
Yeah, he's
got a lot of credibility.
A lot of credibility, and also, he had his come to Jesus. Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
He was just like, wow, what the fuck, and it's a crazy time, man. But well, listen, guys, my guest has been Cindy Sheehan. She's host of Cindy Sheehan's Soapbox. Say that 3 times fast, especially after a few whiskeys.
Tongue twister.
And we're gonna have some other links to some of her other projects that she's working on. And as always, you can listen to the show for free on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes and everything else. And you can always become a member at patreon.com/The Bitter Truth. And if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.